and unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teaching.
In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understanding of the teachings and practice, it is offered freely as a practice of Dhammaparamita. Dana is a Pali word that means generosity or to give freely, and this practice is done without expectation of getting something in return. This is the spirit of speaking about the Dharma. Other ways to practice Dana is to offer support to those who share the teachings, or places of spiritual practice, and to give without judgment or expectation when opportunities arise. Those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on the Dhamma basis. Practice by giving what you can. You can either do this directly or through Great Tree, and we will pass it on to them. And today our speaker is Genjo Trey Williams.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Oh yeah. And he is a student of Reverend Teijo Munnich in the Jikai Dainin Katagiri Roshi lineage. He recently returned from 10 months in Japan practicing at several training monasteries, Kotaiji in Nagasaki and Toshoji in Yakage. He currently lives in Asheville and continues his practice with the Zen Center of Asheville and Great Tree Zen Women's Temple.
Good morning. I wasn't sure what to talk about until a couple days ago, and then it kind of clicked for me to talk about the practice of rest, because that's what I've been investigating for myself the past couple months. And of course, down here in North Carolina, we've entered fall and are heading towards winter. We had a sesshin here at Great Tree last week and had our first little dusting of snow. And so the invitation there for us is to start slowing down. I think the natural world, which we are a part of, is really starting to kind of go more inward. The leaves are falling, and there's less bird chatter in the air. And compared to the summer, you can just feel and hear how literally abuzz the atmosphere is with insects. And this year down here, we had there was a cicada boom, and so there was a huge emergence of cicadas, and now all of that it's quiet now. You don't really hear the insects so much. Every now and then I hear some crickets chirping, and I still see some moths and some stink bugs flying around, but for the most part, it's a real kind of hibernation season, gearing up for that. And I encourage you all to check out our YouTube page. And last week, Dr. Lilian, who's a Chinese medicine doctor, talked about this season, and then a few weeks before that as well, and from a Chinese medicine and Zen perspective, talked about what this season is inviting us into. And so I really encourage y'all to check that out. Um, there's lots of great advice and wisdom for this transition. um, and so for me personally, this summer was very busy. As Mema stated, I don't know if we can still call it recently. It's still, I'll have to update my bio, but I got back from Japan earlier this year and was pretty much just hit the ground running in a way. Um, and it was a very exciting and busy season for us at Great Tree. And in the Buddhist world, we had our a mountain seat here. And so there was lots of planning and lots to do. Um, and lots of movement. And so that all just finished up it was the weekend of September 7th. Um, and then we entered our a practice period, which we're exploring Dogen Zenji's Sansui Kyo, a commentary by Okumura Roshi in his book Mountains and Waters. And we're encouraged every practice period here to kind of set an intention. And so my intention has been to rest. And it's been one of those things for me that I thought I had a sense of what that meant. You know, rest is such I think a pretty commonplace idea, concept, word. Probably one of those things that if you mention rest, everyone, you know, pretty immediately, almost reflexively, everyone has an idea or an image of what that means. I know I certainly do. Um, but just holding that has really that intention to rest um, has really opened up that world for me of you know, and the question has come, well, what does it really mean to rest? You know, um, and it's a question, of course, that comes up here regularly. You know, Anju-san's mentioned this kind of um, exploration of um, you know, this balance of resting and pushing, and what does that look like for each of us, um, to put it that way. Um, and so it's been a season of pushing, and for me up until recently. And when I think on it, you know, most of my life I've been more on the pushing side of things. That's more natural for me. That's more of my tendency. Um, and so this intention to rest has actually been very deep and very interesting and confusing and uh, I have just a lot of curiosity there that I didn't even realize was there. You know, I came in and thought, okay, yeah, well, I'll sleep a little bit more and just kind of slow down. Um, but I'm realizing that that is really only one, that's all kind of the tip of the iceberg with this whole rest practice. um, so yeah, I would just like to share a little bit about what has been coming up for me, um, as just hopefully an invitation to explore this for yourselves too. But you know, a few years ago, I was really deeply involved in the local activism world. I was doing some racial justice work in the area. And so I was reading a lot and really exploring a lot um, about from different activists and different theories of change and whatnot, social justice movements. And one I came across a couple of years ago, her name is Trisha Hersey. I think she's based in Georgia, I think in Atlanta. And um, one of her titles that she goes by is the Nap Bishop, and she started an organization, movement, practice called the Nap Ministry. And she's ordained, I forget what in what tradition, but she's an activist, a poet, an artist, um, and ordained as a minister. I can't remember in which school exactly. Um, but she wrote a book called Rest is Resistance. And it's all about the liberatory practice of rest. Um, and it was one of, when I first came across her work, it immediately kind of awoke something in me. It was one of those, those moments of just like a emphatic, all caps, like, yes, there's something about this that is very important. Um, and so I've been following her work for the past couple of years, listening to her talks, and she's on YouTube and podcasts and all the things. And she does various art installations. She'll do these collective nap events where you just come and you nap together and you dream together and you rest, collective rest. Um, so I really encourage you to explore her work, and she really um, she's really about it. It's a very serious, and of course, because it's so serious, a very playful practice for her. And she talks about the importance of just dreaming and resting, not with the we're not with any goal. We're not trying to become more productive or anything. Just resting as a practice of liberation, as a way of being. Um, and it sparked something for me too at the time. It just came right at the right time. She talks a lot about how, as a social justice activist, and what she was seeing is just the high rates of burnout, with folks in that world. And I think many of us can relate to that, of just feeling very depleted. Um, and and I was really experiencing that in my own self, and also in the work I was doing in the workplace. And we were really burning the candle on both ends, so to speak. And in doing so, we were actually replicating a lot of the harms and injustices that we were actually trying to disrupt, because we were just running on E, and we didn't have the resources to really do the work in the way that we wanted to. And so that practice of rest as liberation, and rest not as a kind of selfish act, or rest as pulling away, but rest in and of itself as a practice of liberation, and a way of actually disrupting systems of oppression. And she goes really, deep into it, and situates it in the political world. And for me, unfortunately, uh, we are all in the political world. We can't really escape it. So when I talk about the political world, I don't necessarily mean, government and senators and whatnot. But I just mean that our life as it is, we live in such a time where, because of where we were born, how we were born, what we look like, how we love, how we sound, where we are. Um, we uh, our different identities, um, um, we're impacted, just by simply being. We're impacted by policies and history. You know, um, she, the rest is resistance is really rooted in kind of anti-capitalist and anti-sexist and or yeah, anti-sexist, anti-racist framework. Because the recognition too is that um, we've inherited a lot, you know. We're not just born and then you know, that's it. You know, we've inherited our DNA from our parents and their parents and their parents, all the way back. We've inherited memories. We've inherited, you know, might call it karma. We've inherited traumas. We've inherited love. You know, um, our lives are really an inheritance in a way. Um, and of course, I think Buddhism has been talking about that from the beginning, and now science in the past few years has caught up with the you know, the discovery, you might say, even though it's not a new discovery, but um, the discovery of epigenetics and the way that our experiences actually change our DNA. You know, so our DNA is actually not fixed; it's actually changing throughout our life, and then it gets passed on, you know, to the people around us, you know, because we are all in experience together and influence each other and are influenced, but then also, you know, to our offspring if we have offspring. So in a very, very real, physical, tangible way, we have inherited, you know, our parents and their parents and their parents all the way back, all their stuff, you know, for better or for worse. And it's talked about a lot as like um, uh, what's the word that everyone's using in the world? Oh, intergenerational trauma, right? That's kind of a buzzword these days. Traumas or experiences that have been passed down to us, you know, that are now ours to work with, you know, should we choose to. Um, and so, of course, you know, um, I think one another way that the rest is resistance really landed for me is you know, as a mixed race person with Black ancestry, one of the things I've inherited is this legacy of not um, being allowed to rest, you know, um, that goes back to transatlantic slave trade when my ancestors were not, their bodies and minds were not their own, you know, in a real way. You know, they didn't, rest was not um, it wasn't up to them. And so I question like how much of that still lives in me, you know, and how much of my resistance to rest or difficulty with rest stems back to that, you know, not even being not even having that as an option. And we all have that in different ways, you know. And then of course in our society, I think we're not really, or rest gets a lot of times collapsed with a lot of different things like laziness or uselessness, or not being not having any worth or value. So there's a lot to work with there. Um, and I make it a point if I mention intergenerational trauma to mention intergenerational love, because that's a side of the coin that doesn't get talked about from my perspective, but is also very real. You know, there's an emphasis on the trauma side, but I think, or I believe that the very fact that we're all here also means that we have inherited a lot of love, you know, and that is also a resource. We've inherited um, a lot of life, a lot of life affirming energy, you know, from our ancestors who wanted us to be here, you know. Um, and so all of this is coming up in just my simple intention to rest, you know. Um, and so there's that side of that, but in a very real kind of embodied, more embodied kind of way. Um, you know, I had a moment a few weeks ago um, where it was during a discussion for our practice period, and we had tea, and I remember sitting there and reaching for the tea that's about, less than a foot in front of me. And I realized how much energy I was exerting just to lift that tea up. I mean, I felt my shoulders lift, I felt my arm lock up, I felt, just all this exertion that was so unnecessary, you know. And so since then, I've been really paying attention to, um, even in the midst of movement, can I be at rest in a way? How in every moment, how much unnecessary energy am I putting out? How much tension am I holding in my body that I don't need? How much exertion in my musculature am I using that's actually not necessary? When I speak in my throat and my vocal cords, how much am I straining that where I don't need to be, you know? Um, and so really also looking at rest, of course, sleeping and napping and just sitting down, doing nothing, being physically at ease or at rest in the more kind of traditional sense, but also really looking at um, the way um, I can just rest in every moment in a way, you know. Um, and it to connect it to Zazen, it's kind of a similar thing for me. Of course, there's the formal practice of doing Zazen where we sit and face the wall or face out, depending on our circumstances, which is really important, I've found, because I know for me, it's easy to trick myself into, there's this idea that everything is Zazen every moment, but it's easy to, I know it's easy for me to trick me into, oh, well, I don't need to do sitting Zazen because everything's Zazen, and it's the same with rest. Um, but it's true, both are true and not true. Um, and so, in Zazen, we have our instructions from Dogen Zenji, the kind of quintessential Zen text, the Fukan Zazengi. Um, and remember when I first came across the Fukan Zazengi, there were certain pieces that really jumped out at me. And one of those is about 3/4 through the text. It's a relatively short text, but about 3/4 through, um, Higu's barking, something. Dogen Zenji says, the Zazen I speak of is not learning meditation. It is simply the Dharma gate of repose and bliss. And that phrasing really jumped out at me and still jumps out at me. It's simply the Dharma gate of repose and bliss. Um, and there are different translations of that. It's simply the Dharma gate of ease and pleasantness, or it's simply the Dharma gate of peace and joy, which is what Okumura Roshi usually translates it as. And he goes on to say, nirvana. It's simply the Dharma gate of nirvana. And the Japanese phrasing is anraku. Um, so it's two characters, one phrase. Um, and that an means ease, um, and raku means joy. Um, depending on what it's combined with, sometimes can mean music as well, or comfort. Um, and so again, it's this practice of showing up and figuring out how much energy to exert, you know, while at the same time recognizing that there is no effort involved. Yuko's walking around. It's also said in the Fukan Zazengi that Zazen has nothing whatsoever to do with sitting upright or lying down, which is another. I think you can really turn that into a koan, and really sit with or I guess lie down with what that really means, you know. But yeah, it's interesting, it's I think there's a lot to explore there for us as um, Westerners, in the realm of rest, and of course in the realm of zazen. What really is zazen, and how do we do it, or not do it, and what is right effort? All these great things for ourselves. I had this moment of sitting a couple years ago in the monastery. It was during a sesshin, and I was really struggling. I was just like, um, I just felt like I really wasn't getting it. You know, it was just like my mind was just like tossing and turning. I was really not experienced the peace and joy of zazen. I was like really, yeah, just straining a lot, I think, you know. Um, and I was sitting, and then all of a sudden, it was towards the end of the sesshin, it just kind of, it's one of those things that just pops up, that comes from somewhere, it doesn't really feel or land like a regular thought, seems like it comes from somewhere else. And it was right effort is no effort. And that for a while that really carried me. It just settled everything, And of course now I've lost that. It doesn't really make sense anymore, because the conditions of my life have changed and my mind has changed. And that was the uh that was the I don't know what word to use, but that was what that moment was, and it just was right, you know. But it still comes up for me, and uh and of course, I got to let it go and keep letting it go, because there was a point of me that wants to experience that again. That right effort is no effort, and that effortlessness. Um, but that is gone, It, it's there and it's not. And so that's too kind of coming up with this practice of rest for me. I think too, where there's the experience of when we're really at rest or resting, whatever that looks like, whether we're sleeping or lying down or moving throughout the world, so much is allowed to come up, you know. Um, it's kind of that experience of stillness or silence. Um, I think maybe rest is another kind of version of that. Um, a lot gets worked through in that resting state. And it's one thing that's comes up for me is it's easy for me to see rest as a kind of privilege. Um, you know, um, I think one thing that comes up, especially in the I got a lot of pushback when I first came across Trisha Hersey's work and was sharing it with my activist colleagues I was working with. It's like, well, what if we like stopped? What if we like didn't do anything and like rested? And it just didn't compute. It was like there's no time or what? That's crazy. People we need action now. And I think the same is true for sitting. You know, there's a lot of resistance to just sitting. Um, and I don't know how to quite do it, but I know it's important to kind of challenge that in myself and in others, to kind of, it's almost like, well, that's exactly why, it's because we're so busy and there's so much to do that that the practice of just sitting and the practice of rest is actually so profound and so important, you know. And it's so easy to lose. I know for me, it's so easy to lose that because there's just so much going on. Everything is constantly moving, of course. Um, and so, there's really nothing to do, but there's a lot of, I know, desire to do things and pressure to do things. It's like what's coming to mind is like, you know, when things are on fire, there you want to put the fire out, you know, you want to put the fire out. Um, Alarms sounding and people running to grab extinguishers and um, water hoses. And of course that can be necessary, but I wonder too if it's also necessary at times to just burn, to let things burn, to let ourselves burn. You know, there's that meme of the little cartoon dog. Y'all know there's everything's on fire, and the dog's just sitting there, I think, with a cup of coffee at the dinner table, just kind of smiling, surrounded by flames. And the caption is usually like, "Oh, this is fine. Everything's fine." And I think that is can be a profound practice, midst of the flames, can we just sit and let, you know, things burn? I wonder how trying to put out this fire, so to speak, maybe literally, but maybe even but more like metaphorically or metaphysically, um, perpetuates a lot of these things that we're actually trying to put out. It's almost, the fire can't burn forever. And sometimes doing actually adds fuel to the fire, you know. And so I'm continuing to explore and continuing to just kind of hold that intention. And of course, at the same time, let go of the intention to rest and just let it be. Um, and um, yeah, if this is, if that's, this is like, resonating for you, please share now or in the future yeah, what rest is for you, because I know for me it's very helpful to hear from other people who are also on this path and exploring these things for themselves. And, of course, when I say rest and practice rest, it's all in the context of my life. And so it's very helpful to receive it from other people's lives, because it invites me into more openness around what this whole thing is. So I'll stop there, and if there are any questions or thoughts or comments, please don't hesitate to share.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, can y'all hear?
Uh, Thank you for this Dharma talk. I think it's very appropriate given indeed the season. And what I thought as you were talking, that it's great to remind us of rest. And I thought it's beautiful how you found, I would say, a modern context and a modern way of expressing. You mentioned right effort, but I thought also in Taoist tradition, Wu Wei, Wu Wei, which means, I mean, it's translated differently, but basically it means non-doing, and it's been debated along centuries actually what it meant, and it's still being debated. Does it mean not doing anything, not acting? And some people translate it as non-intervention. And there's even a guy, I don't remember his name, but he published something called The Nine Meanings of Wu Wei. And one of them is mindfulness, not no effort. I know is part of it. So exactly what you mentioned, but I thought what was nice is that you made it very clear and simple and related to our life. It's like suddenly I thought a Wu Wei could be explained very easily, with that notion of resting and daring to rest. And like you said, with the fire, we can make it more complicated or more philosophical and deepen it. But basically, what does it mean to rest? Or doing sometimes moving and being still in the movement. You mentioned that too. So I really enjoyed your using the concept of rest to, again, as a more modern way maybe of talking about Wu Wei. So thank you for that.
Thank you for sharing that. You can rock, paper, scissors or something.
Talk, and I've heard of the Nat Bishop, and I really love that understanding of rest. And I think I've been definitely working with it myself too. And what comes up for me is I think that rest is there's resistance because, well, not maybe not for everyone, but I sense for myself, because it requires sacrifice and like a level of maturity, I think, that I'm resistant to. And I think that like there's a balance, like you were talking about, and like and in the Dharma talk last week too, about like restoration so that we can be abundant for others, and that a lot of people talk about of rest. is like it's needed in order to give our best and to exist like in balance. But when we rest, we have to not do other things that we might want to do, or just understand that like, yeah, just I feel a sense of like sacrifice is like a big factor of rest for me, or that's why I sense that I am resistant to actually include it, and then it takes a lot of effort, not because just because of the sense of that I'm losing something if I rest. But I think that there's different ways to understand it, like the way that you're sharing, and that some people share about like the freedom and rest or liberation and rest. It helps to like ease that like resistance, I think. And yeah, I think that's like what it made me think about, but I really appreciated your sharing.
Yeah, I had a moment last night just to comment on that, of the sacrifice piece of I got home and, you know, during the day I had all these things I wanted to do when I was home, and it was late. And so I was like, I'm tired, and do I sleep or do I work on these things I wanted to do? And so there was that element of sacrifice, you know, and there's this idea of like FOMO. You all heard that? This it's an acronym meaning like fear of missing out. And it's basically, the way I see it is like overexerting. The way I overexert myself because I'm afraid that I'll miss something, you know. I'm gonna force myself to like go out late or to meet this person or go to the party because I don't actually want to, but I'm afraid that I'll miss out on something if I don't go. And of course, the counter to that has arisen is JOMO, you know, y'all heard that, the joy of missing out. And it's kind of that freedom you were talking about, the freedom that exists in rest. It's like, oh, the joy of actually missing that party or whatever it is, you know, missing that event. And I know I've experienced that. It does require sacrifice or like letting go of something.
Thank you, Genjo, for sharing your exploration of multiple layers and depth of rest, the right or wise effort, if you will. And what came up for me in that, several things, but it all pointed back to quality or qualities, cultivating qualities. And your comment, and maybe you could share it again with us about Dogen Zenji, talking about Zazen being bliss and rose. Could you say that again for us?
Repose,
Repose
is one translation. Yeah.
Repose.
Repose and bliss.
And that sank me really deep internally into a quality of Zazen, into a quality of rest, where the external environment of factors can't affect that, because it's cultivating those qualities. It's like the internal martial arts, where my practice is in yoga. It's at those internal aspects that the Bodhi seeds that are already there, if you will, cultivating them up. And I just thought it was a wonderful illustration and phrase that you used to set that off. I'm really grateful for it. One of those moments, perhaps a mirror of what you experienced.
Maybe that's what Dogen means when he says the backward step that turns the light inwardly.
Echo and show.
Pardon?
Echo and show.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Genjo. Is it all right if I speak?
Of course.
All right. All right, this was just excellent and what I needed to hear, especially when you said that sometimes doing actually adds fuel to the fire. And yeah. And when you were talking about epigenetics, that is so true. And I just want to bring up this one book. It Didn't Start With You. How inherited family trauma shapes who we are and how we end the cycle. Yeah, that's really a deep one. It takes a lot of looking back, a lot of time and a lot of effort to look back at your history. And as far as any advice on resting or how I rest, I don't know. I'm trying to lay down and just lay down in the afternoon and not do anything for a while.
Mm.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing and for your practice of rest. I know it's easier said than done. So thank you. I want to, oh, go ahead.
No, please, sorry.
Well, I want to, because you, Tonkyo mentioned that, brought up again, repose, because I thought that's a really, it's not a word I hear often. I think that's one reason why it jumped out at me at the time. And of course, because it's the first translation I read in the Fukan Zazengi. So it's, usually, at least for me, the first one, even if it may be later, I find better translations or something about the first time I read something that really sticks with me. But I had to look up what that really meant, repose. I had a kind of an idea, but I looked it up in the dictionary, and one translation or one definition that I like is eternal or heavenly rest. So I just wanted to share that because that was really beautiful to me. Okay, thanks, Linda. Go ahead.
Well, first, I wanted to echo Chris's remarks about this being very timely, needing to hear this and be engaged in this talk as well. This is excellent. So thank you, Genjo, and everyone who's contributed. If I'm hearing correctly, I find it fascinating, interesting. I don't know what quite the right word is there, but it's almost like there's a layer of stress to get to rest. It's fascinating to me that it's that almost like, especially when you are finding it difficult to rest, and by you I mean, anybody who this might resonate with, where it's like, I personally sometimes find that layer of stress. I think it was Emma who had said something similar about almost like needing to overcome that challenge to even get to that point of rest. So I find that very fascinating, but I also find it wrapped up in the concept of letting go. So we talk in here a lot about that concept of let go. And it's almost like you need to let go of the control to get to the point of rest. So it's just, it's very layered. A lot I feel like can be taken away from all of this conversation. And to echo, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the gentleman's name who also talked about the layers, the depth that you went to this conversation. It's just a lot to chew on. So all of this to say thank you. This has been a great talk.
Thank you. His name's Tonkyo.
Hello, Tankyo. Thank you.
I think what you said too, it's like it's not even that letting go gets to the rest, I think, but letting go is the rest in a way, you know. And just thinking about in my body the way I feel that, like a lot of times when I'm when I realize or don't realize there's something I'm trying to get it, like I feel it in my body, I'm leaning forward. And then when I can see that and let it go, it's like naturally I'm at rest, and maybe that's where the no effort is, there's actually, it's kind of a very organic and natural state of being in a way. And it's deep and layered, right? Because there's always, at least I've found, there's always something I'm holding on to. Another thing.
And what you mentioned too is that it is indeed revolutionary to talk about rest, because we live in a culture of performance. And for sure, when I've noticed, and when I'm asked, how are you? There is that tendency to want to say how busy I have been as a badge of honor. And I do notice how many people do answer that way when you say, how are you? Oh, I'm so busy. It's like it's a state of being to be proud of. So what you're talking about, rest or non-doing or right effort, it really goes against the grain of our present world. There was actually a woman who said once that people, when they talk about self-realization, they tend to think whether they're talking to Buddha or to God, it's almost they're talking about an employment agency, like finding the right job, finding the right way to be, the right way to act. And so we do define, I mean, our culture certainly encourages us to define ourselves through what we do and what we accomplish. Thank you.
I'd like to repeat or echo Anji-san's reflection. First of all, how insightful it was. Secondly, how I embraced the phrase. And Anji-san commented about turning the light inward. Maybe that's what he meant by Dogen, meant by turning the light in. And then I commented, echo Hinsho. And I think that's Dogen says in so many words that is the essence of Zazen. Perhaps the essence of rest. I just wanted to emphasize what Anji-san said. So, I did.
I think for me, being a Gen Z and how we kind of are on our phones a lot and stuff, I feel like rest has to be a really conscious thing, because like I feel like my generation, we can just lay down and bed rot and scroll on our phone for hours, and it's not rest, it's something else. And I think sometimes, I don't know, I feel like I live on snail time and I'm a very naturally slow moving person. And I feel like sometimes you can actually rest harder if you are like doing more. And I think, I don't know, probably not many people can relate to that because I'm like only 20, so I haven't really had to work very hard in my life. like a little bit, but not to the same extent that like someone who's been an adult for a long time would. But I just think that sometimes the rest can be like also activity, but maybe that's not really true. But I think that if you're taking care of yourself or you're working out or something, or you feel like you're not pushing yourself in the way that's like doesn't allow rest, I think it can be beneficial, because I feel like a lot of young people are maybe thinking that all the time like we're tired or like we need rest, but we really aren't getting rest because we aren't like necessarily kind of like setting ourselves up to where we would naturally be tired and not be anxious. But I don't know if anyone would relate to that, because I feel like I'm a lot younger than like most people here.
Can anyone relate to that? Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's really important to hear.
It's that balance, you know?
Yeah.
I think
Mm.
that's the thing I think about a lot.
Mm.
I don't think it's just a Gen X thing.
Mm.
Just finding that balance, because you can become lethargic.
Mm. Right.
That's true.
And I think what you said too is really important about how energy expensive or exhausting anxiety can be, and just thinking, I think that's one thing that Zazen really helps me to see is when I do not thinking, when I let go of thinking, realizing how much energy it takes to think.
Especially, I feel like the times when we were sitting and my mind just kept going on stuff, I felt like my body would hurt. But when I would sit and I would feel more at ease and peaceful, I didn't feel as like much like I needed to like move around a bunch, or like my back didn't hurt as much. So
Yeah.
I feel like it definitely makes a difference.
Mm. Okay, we're a little bit over time, so I guess we should wrap up. May the merit of this practice
May
The merit of this practice
benefit all beings
benefit all
be
and bring peace.
and
bring peace.
Just some announcements. Tuesdays for local folks, Tuesdays at the Zen Center of Asheville, which you can find online every Tuesday starting at 7. There's a half hour of meditation and then a Dharma talk or a Dharma discussion, or sometimes just some gathering and having tea and talking. So that's Tuesday nights at 7. Saturdays here at Great Tree again. So we'll be here next Saturday. Thursday evenings here at Great Tree, both in person and online. If you want to do some sitting, we sit for 2 periods of Zazen starting at 6 p.m. Thursday evenings. And you're welcome to sit for 1 period or both.
Intro to Zen
Oh, thank you. Intro to Zen tomorrow
at 10:30.
at 10:30.
Sarah McCarthy is going to do it.
Oh, great. Yeah, Sarah McCarthy is going to lead Intro to Zen tomorrow at 10:30, and that's online. It's on Zoom. Same Zoom link as today. Anything else? Okay. Well, we'll close out. I'll do 3 prostrations and then we'll sign off.